Hello and welcome to That One Idea, a podcast series chronicling early stage founder journeys brought to you by WaterBridge Ventures. Through this podcast series, we hope to bring out the founder moments and journeys that led them to starting up. We highlight the humans behind the founders as they blitz through their 0 to 1 journeys and transition their ideas into scale worthy businesses. These conversations reveal the unique spirit and the talent of these incredible founders as they share the vision of who they are and what they're building. In this episode, we have Anjali Sosale, partner at WaterBridge, chatting with Akshay Singhal, founder and CEO of Log9 Materials. Akshay is a 2019 Forbes 30 Under 30 Asia Awardee with a mission to solve the pressing global issue of climate change with the power of nanotechnology and innovation. Log9, founded in 2015, is India's leading battery tech company and the only one to have ground-up developed lithium-ion cell technology for Gigafactory production. Log9 has India's largest battery R&D team of 125 plus members and has a 250 megawatt-hour battery pack production capacity, which is equivalent to batteries for 40,000 three-wheelers.
Awesome. Hi, Akshay. Thank you so much for joining us on That One Idea. This is a podcast series that we run every year, and this is season 3. The reason for us to do That One Idea is to truly bring out and unravel, I would say, the backstory to starting up. I think there are many parts of the founding journey that needs deglamorizing, if I may.
Yes.
So today the objective is to really understand what problem statement you're solving for at Log9, why you're so passionate about climate and EV, and what is exciting you for the year ahead. So on that note, thank you so much once again for taking the time out and welcome to WaterBridge Ventures.
Thank you, Anjali. Thanks for calling me on this and really great to be here.
Fantastic. On that note, I always love to ask people where they were born and raised and what were your big influences. It could be people, it could be milestones, it could be events. What were your big influences growing up?
So I was born in a place called Deoband,
Yeah.
which is a very small town or a big village, so to speak,
Yeah.
near to Roorkee.
Okay.
So 30 kilometers from there. So I did my entire education from Roorkee, IIT Roorkee campus
Yeah.
as well. So did my schooling there, then my BTech there, and
Yeah.
then did my Ph.D. there. So that has been the journey and where I grew up. In terms of influence, I think my mom has been a very big influence on me growing up. And
Yeah.
one thing that I've learned from her is that there's nothing which is unachievable in that sense.
Yeah.
So you must try.
Yeah.
And you should really go out for it and then try without thinking too much about what's going to happen.
Yeah.
If you fail. I think that has been a big influence in
Yeah.
my life. Yeah.
So Log9 was the first company to be incubated at the IIT Roorkee campus. And
Yeah.
you started off with being a material science company dabbling with graphene. Take us through the early garage/campus days and the early origins behind the idea.
It was early 2014, late 13, right, when I was at Center of Nanotechnology, which was a newly formed center over there.
Mm.
I had to convince the fellow department there to give us a separate lab.
Yeah.
And I had one of my grandfather, like my real grandfather's brother. So he was a scientist in NPL, National
Yeah.
Physical Laboratory. So I met him at one of the family events and we started talking, and then he was just got retired at that time. So he said, "What are you doing? Are you thinking of doing something in material science?" Because at that time I was not very fancied by material science in that sense, but I was looking at projects and exploring things in that sense, right? So he decided to come from Delhi every weekend and we set up a lab. We invested in the lab, bought equipment on our own money and all of it. And that's when it started. Then I happened to go for an internship in Canada.
Mm.
I can very easily say that that was the most idle time in my life that I remember, even today, because things would start at 9 or 10 in the morning and they would really finish up max by 4 in the evening.
Yeah.
And moment I landed there, within 2 weeks, the professor just went on a vacation. So it was a very chill time.
Yeah.
And so two things happened. Like there was too much time to think about stuff, and then it was too boring
Yeah.
at the same time.
Yeah.
So that I decided there and then that this Canada for sure not is happening
Not happening
in life, and also academic research is not something I will be able to do. So there was an inclination to look at scientific research and stuff like that, but not in an academic setting. And then the best way was to kind of do something of your own and build your own venture, and where one thing can kind of transform into another and fuel other innovations.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that was the initial, so to say, motivation to start a very innovative company where you can create technologies ground up and they can fuel more technologies in the future. So that was the thought process. So when I came back from my internship, Dad was very happy because he never wanted me to kind of join a 9 to 5
Yeah.
job in
Yeah.
any sense. And because I come from a business
Yeah.
background, so he was happy that I'm thinking about starting something of my own. We took a go down of his in the backyard of my house, converted that into so to say a pilot graphene
Yeah.
manufacturing lab.
Yeah.
And the lab that we had got in IIT Roorkee that became the R&D center for
Yeah.
Log9 to start with, then the ecosystem was just not there. Like nobody
Okay.
really understood what a startup or what running a company means in IIT Roorkee. Incubator was just coming around. It was not there. It was not formalized yet. So over that 9-10 month period, as I was formalizing stuff and all of that, when I completed my BTech and I was enrolling into my PhD program, I was reminded by my HOD
Mm.
that how can you join a curriculum
Yeah.
program and run a company patent? This
Yeah.
is illegal.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
had to really bring out the
Yeah.
policies at the institute
Yeah.
level and really fight a very big paper battle to say that
Yeah.
this is actually
Yeah.
something which is good that I'm doing and not something which is
Yeah.
illegal and clandestine
Yeah.
I'm trying to get into.
And you continued doing your PhD well after you raised your first few rounds of funding as
Yes,
well.
yes.
Yeah.
And then there were a lot
Yeah.
of firsts. So
Yeah.
not only that we were the first company to be incubated
Yeah.
in IIT Roorkee, but at the same time, it was the first time when a startup founder was being allowed to do a part-time PhD program.
Yeah.
So there were a lot of fighting with the administration,
Yeah.
which is also, people say that I have a part-time hobby doing that. But that also led to a lot of
Yeah.
firsts otherwise.
Yeah. No, that's incredible. And tell us about how the name Log9 came about.
So we thought a lot about name since late 14 itself, and mom said that you're trying to do nanotechnology and graphene is a nanomaterial. So nano is 10 to the
Mm.
minus 9 meters, right?
Mm.
So logarithmic 9,
Yeah.
that's how the
Oh, very
name
nice.
came around.
Yeah. Incredible. So I know that you're what I like to call a conservation optimist or a climate optimist. And given your own journey, you're already paying it forward for the ecosystem. You set up your own incubator / angel fund. You actually seeded one of our portfolio companies, Zabi and Ankit, at Loopworm. Tell us about why you're so passionate about solving for this and how you're literally building the ecosystem as you're building Log9. Yeah.
So this comes from two things. One is that the core idea, the motivation behind Log9 to be able to create technologies locally in India, because we have never been known as a technology creator. We have predominantly been technology adopter.
Yeah.
In that sense, that's where the Log9 journey started. And the second aspect is that if you look at climate change, the biggest impact of climate change is not going to be faced initially, at least by people living in the West or in the temperate belt, so across US, Europe, China in that sense, but more so people in the global South, right? And we are going to see the worst of it, and we're already facing that.
Yeah.
Right. So whether it's India, Southeast Asia, Africa, Latin America, this is a belt that's going to see the worst of it. And from that perspective, we are on our own, right? What we thought in 2017, right? If we are on a journey of creating technologies here, the one sector where technology creation becomes even more paramount for us is the climate sector. So finding climate solutions becomes very, very important, because a climate solution which works for India is not the same which works for US or Europe. Their requirements are very different due to the operating conditions itself. And hence creating our own technologies here becomes very, because there's no chance that they will create technologies for us. So that is the whole motivation for me personally, that it gives us a chance to create technologies here without the fear of getting obsolete by technologies coming out from there, because they just won't apply over here. So that's the whole thought process behind being so involved in the climate space. And 3 years ago, all three of us at Log9, like Karthik, me, and Pankaj, decided that we'll put all our personal savings towards climate tech startups. So that's where we have put all our money in, and we have invested in almost 5 companies in the climate space. Loopworm being one of them, but Metastable, which is into lithium recycling. Then we have Pran, which is air filtration and a carbon capture company. Then we have Climbs, and then we have TSAW, which is into last mile drone deliveries and stuff like that. So the idea is to really help these founders, very hardware and tech driven founders, to basically learn from our experience, so to speak, that what to do, what not to do in the initial days, and expedite the journey, because we don't really have, every company doesn't have 10 years to kind of figure
to
it
wait
out.
for the other person to get
Also
through the
figure out
journey,
that what's right, what's wrong,
Yeah.
and what's the right strategy, and what not to do and what to do in that sense. So helping in that sense and motivating people to really start in the climate tech
Yeah.
side.
Yeah. And from when you started in 2015 till today, what are the big changes or enablers that you have seen for like EV adoption, both not just public policy side, but overall in the, whether it's like, policy making is one part of it, let's say the startup ecosystem, just the investor mindset. But what are the big changes you've seen today which have helped you with Tailwinds versus when you were starting out 8 years
So
ago?
realization of climate change,
Yeah.
is very, very omnipresent. One good thing that I always say in India, in contrast to US, is that we don't have very opposing
Yeah.
political positions in the country. That one party is
No
completely
deniers.
denial, and the other
Yeah.
is only pro for it. Whether they can fight at different or on different matters,
Yeah.
but at least when it comes to climate change, EV and stuff like that, I don't think there's a polarization on that front.
Yeah.
So that's very good
Yeah.
for our country and for the larger world itself. And on the ecosystem side, I think there's more understanding and depth as compared to 2015 or even 2018, 19. Over the last 3, 4 years, especially after COVID, there has been far more depth, capital depth, as well as understanding depth when it comes to the VC ecosystem or the startup ecosystem in general. That's the reason why it is far easier for climate tech companies today to raise a pre-seed or a Series A. Anything up to a $10 million check is not that difficult now.
Yeah.
Whereas there's still a vacuum, I would say, in the Series B to Series C stage.
Yeah.
Because that's where it is still not PE driven. It can't be a
There's
pure
still some
metric of
venture risk.
profitability and revenue.
Yeah.
It still needs a venture risk. But that's actually the level where there's still gap. But I think early starter in that space, it is our responsibility to kind of really cut out the shrubs and the forest to kind of make way for it, right?
Let's maybe start with battery chemistry, and you've chosen to make your own cells. I know you started with graphene, but quickly moved to AFCs and now like lithium-ion. Take us through that journey, like why you feel like lithium-ion is better for India given where the market is today. But let's just spend some time on the reason you chose to build and manufacture, and obviously a segue into localization of the supply chain as well. Yeah.
Right. We started the material science company, Graphene and Carbon Materials was the genesis. In 2017, when we moved to Bangalore, that's when we started to look at what kind of environmental solutions we can build using these materials. So after dabbling with a lot of different options from air filtration, water filtration, spill containment, we landed on batteries. And we realized that if you look at the carbon emissions problem, like 2/3 or more of it is actually attributable directly or indirectly to your energy demand. Whether it's the energy required for mobility or transportation, whether it is for running a building or house or factories or whatever it is, right? Or even agriculture for that matter. So if 2/3 of that is coming from energy, like if you solve for energy, then you're targeting the biggest piece of the problem, right? And that's where batteries become important, whether it is your cars or vehicles, or it is your clean energy storage, batteries become very, very important. So that let's park everything else. Let's look at batteries and what kind of batteries would be important for India. One rookie mistake that we made at that time was that we tried to solve all the challenges with battery at once with one solution. That typically leads to a more fundamental transformation in the way things are done. And that's where the aluminum technology came in, because it didn't really need charging. It would be refueled. It is a high temperature battery, so you don't need to cool it down. It has a very long life as compared to lithium ion. So all the things, and on supply chain perspective as well, aluminum, we are a major producer of aluminum in the world. So
very little
all
wastage as
boxes kind of got ticked. And in that excitement, what got missed out is that aluminum fuel cell is a technology which cannot be used for vehicular application as long as it's for small haul distance, right? That's true with any fuel cell technology. The reason hydrogen fuel cell doesn't scale also is from the perspective that energy efficiency is quite low. So if you don't need a very long range, there is no point of opting a technology which is 30-40% efficient, whereas you have batteries which are 90-95% efficient. So that doesn't really make sense. So that's where both aluminium and hydrogen fuel cells struggle in that regard. We realized that very quickly within 2 years that this has its applications, but in niche sectors. And for example, as a replacement for diesel generators, it can work out. As a generating source for a long haul vehicle or truck or a bus or a ship, it can work out. But not for the usual vehicles that are seeing traction in EV in that sense. But luckily, what was happening was that as we were developing the aluminum fuel cell, and just like a hydrogen fuel cell also, it's a constant power generating source. So you need something in between, like a small battery, to take care of the peaks and troughs in energy demand, because a vehicle is not always on a constant power demand. So we anyway were developing a lithium-ion battery to work with that. And what we saw was the power and the performance of the battery that we created was super awesome for a small vehicle platform, like a 2-wheeler, 3-wheeler, or small 4-wheeler in the market. And those vehicles were struggling in the market already because of the operating conditions that we have. So batteries were failing far frequently, and they were supposed to a lot of performance issues, a lot of issues with safety, fire risk, and all of that. right? So that got us a very fast GTM in the sense that we can take this and deploy in the market and scale from there. So that's how the lithium ion came into picture. And given our expertise on material science, idea was to always integrate maximum that we can do over here itself in India. And that's how we decided to do cells and battery packs and then much more on that.
Have you always been like localized with supply chain from day zero?
So supply chain localization cannot happen from day zero,
Yeah.
right? It's a journey to kind of increase the percentage of local application. Even today, the cells that we put in our battery packs have to be imported.
Okay.
Because while we have the only cell manufacturing facility in the country today, it is not at a commercial scale, right? It is at a pilot commercial scale. It's a 50 megawatt hour capacity, largest in Southeast Asia. But that's nothing in comparison to what you would have in China.
Yeah.
It's 1,000 times smaller.
Yeah.
So from that perspective, you cannot have a competitive manufacturing scale or consistency. So as we go there, it doesn't mean that you can't produce and you can't sell anything. So that's one thing which is very important to recognize in the whole hardware of the climate space, that faster GTM solution, GTM solutions are very, very important because that gives scale to the business and the venture and the leverage in the market. And it doesn't need to be perfect and 100% localized at the get-go itself.
And what would be required to get to, if not 100, at least like 50% of like China's scale? And is public policy and public funding, infrastructure, subsidies,
I think public funding,
a key part of this?
Quite a bit, because if you look at all the companies from in a battery EV space, whether in China or in the US, right, they have received significant amount of public funding. We unfortunately don't have that depth of public funding. And
are the OEMs even incentivized to adopt and buy from you as well?
Yeah, but so see, there are two aspects of it. One is that if you ask me, 3 year younger version of me, that if government should give more money, I would definitely say yes. But now I realize more that in terms of where the constraints are, we are a big economy, not because of our economical growth in that sense, but because we are a very large. Right. So billions of people coming together make it a large economy. So we have to understand that the amount of resources available are very limited, especially on a
per capita
basis. It's very, very low. Right. So that's where expecting too much financial support from the government is also wrong in many sense. But yes, policy support is something which becomes important in this case. And that's what government has been doing. It's been tuned to do that. And it's actually very progressive and pragmatic in kind of bringing up new policies and advancing them. So that's, I think I won't blame the government on that front. But where we have a bit of a immaturity in the ecosystem is on the capital depth from a PVC perspective. Because this is a very new space. It's globally a new space, and in India, it's a completely nascent space. So understanding of what builds or breaks this kind of a journey or business growth in that sense is something which is not figured out. It's not comprehensible, and you fear what you don't know. And that's where the challenge really lies.
Very interesting. And just moving to the infrastructure piece, right? A lot of these problems on like range anxiety or even like batteries blowing up, or even to do like long distance, would need a charging infrastructure, or a rapid charging or a fast charging infrastructure, maybe even battery swapping. You're also critical to building out the entire like infrastructure piece as well. Why is that critical to you? It's almost like your batteries are an anchor tenant for all the infrastructure that you're building. Take us through why you chose to get into that piece, and how easy is it to be interoperable at scale, given that maybe it's fair to assume that there will be different battery compositions in the market at scale.
See, the reason why there's a lot of anxiety with respect to electric vehicles, whether it's from a range perspective, where do I charge, how do I run it? So there are many aspects to it. It comes more on range anxiety perspective, but it's just a fear of unknown that what do I do with it? That's where the challenge lies, because it's happening primarily because of the approach the companies have taken. But now EV is a completely new solution. You cannot just sell and forget about it. You can't make a product and say that, okay, to the customer that you figure out what you have to do with it and how you have to manage it. The initial adopters, the tech enthusiasts probably will do it, but it will never scale. So if you really need to have a long-term scalable growth, then you need to support the customer in getting tuned to the solution itself. And that's where controlling the ecosystem, or basically enabling the ecosystem, so to speak, it becomes very, very important. And that's what the primary motivation for us, that if we really have to have a sustainable growth, and we have been growing 3x year on year since FY 2020, then you cannot just sell and forget about it, because things will sooner or later they'll start coming back. And that's what has happened quite a bit in the ecosystem. So as I said that, okay, how can we take an approach where our product, our hardware product itself enables a far better data-driven approach for our customers to ensure that they can maximize utilization and maximize efficiency of using a EV as compared to a fuel vehicle. And that's where the whole digital ecosystem came in. And today we collect 36 variable data every second from each battery deployed in field. So it's a very rich data pipeline. You can do so much with it.
Yeah.
Right? We have been able to grow the utilization of charging infra. So we don't put charging infra, but what we did was for interoperability, as you were saying, right? We said that whatever is the existing charging infra, that should be able to charge a smaller vehicle, a larger vehicle, and whatever is there, and charge it as fast as possible. Right? So there's no point of introducing a completely new setup itself. And that's where we said that, okay, people have deployed these charging stations in the market. How can we use a data-driven approach to ensure that the utilization goes up? Because if the utilization goes up, they will be incentivized to deploy more. So we have seen utilization go up from 6-7% to as high as 42-43%, which makes charging infra for the first time profitable.
Yeah.
So, and similarly, EVs, if you look at it, right, they are always costlier upfront. The running cost is very much, right? Because just electricity costs that you are incurring. From that perspective, if you use a EV in a commercial application, right, typically what we have seen in last mile is that people would do 2,000 to 2,500 kilometers in a month, right? But if you are able to change the 2,500 to 3,500, 4,000 kilometers, which is possible, right? Your TCO becomes super attractive, right? So how can I incentivize or how can I enable my end customer, which are like fleet operators and people like that, to go through a 3,500, 4,000 kilometer kind of a utilization? So that is where supporting the end customer maximize their benefit helps everybody, right? If they use more, financier gets their EMIs on time. We as asset managers in that play get more money in, right? More of our batteries get sold. And everybody gets benefited from that perspective.
And since you spoke about financiers, I had a question in terms of they also play a critical part, like debt financing and financing batteries and the infrastructure also is a key part of enabling that scale that you were talking about, right? Just very quickly, you touched upon government and EEVC, but on the debt side as well, have you seen financial institutions play a larger role in financing, both batteries and infrastructure? Are they deriving more comfort from the life of these batteries, the possibility of even like a second life, just the fact that you're solving for some of these range anxiety issues? There's better data now on performance. They're safer in many ways. But are they also able to underwrite this risk? And what about the debt financing part of building the ecosystem?
So if you look at the whole debt financing ecosystem, right, and particularly if you're looking from an NBFC's perspective, right, it's the core bread and butter as I understand it. Maybe my understanding is limited, but as I understand it, the core bread and butter of NBFCs is to constantly find new sectors to invest in, because once the banks start to understand it, then they plays out.
Yes.
Right? Nobody will pay them the higher cost of capital, and anyway the banks will take over.
Yeah.
So from that perspective, NBFCs have always been excited about the EV space because it's a new space, it's a large and massive opportunity in that regard. And it will take far longer for banks to kind of really understand and appreciate the nitty-gritties of it. So from that perspective, they have come in even before we became commercial. But the challenge was that they burned their hand significantly because the visibility in terms of the residual life of the asset, the performance of the asset, and why it's working, not working, what's failing, who's fault, the vehicle manufacturer, the battery manufacturer, was completely non-existent. And they had no visibility on the asset. And that's where, if you look at initially, like around 2019 to 21, in that period, your financing tenures, for example, a three-wheeler had gone down from 4 years to as low as 2 years. Now the financing tenure goes down to 2 years. The monthly cash outflow for a fleet customer becomes super high. And then obviously they will not like an EV at all. So from that, now today we have taken it back to 6 years. We've taken it back beyond what was there. Right. So from that perspective, why has it happened? Right. So it has happened because we've been able to provide that visibility that yes, this is how the battery is degrading or performing. Right. This is the residual life. There are now insurers involved in the whole process who can insure the residual life of the battery after end of use in white vehicle. So that ecosystem has been brought together with a very data-driven approach. That has helped these people to come back, and more people are now interested to finance EVs in that regard.
That's good to know. And talking about data-driven approach, I think BMS, battery management, is a large part of this as well. And if I just draw a parallel to the mobile industry, do you think this will go the Apple way, where hardware and software will always be like joint in the hips, or will this go the, let's say, Samsung Android way, where one player focuses on hardware and there's a separate player that focuses on software. But broadly, I know you've chosen to also be involved in BMS right now. But again, an at-scale question, how do you see partnerships in this space evolving? Do you think BMS can always be independent of hardware, or it always has to be, combined? Yeah.
So BMS itself is a hardware plus a software
Yeah.
problem, right? So BMS needs to have that embedded hardware
Yeah.
that has to go in the battery. And then there's a whole software layer
Yeah.
on top of it. Now, if you look at the software layer on
Yeah.
top of it, it is not very complex.
Yeah.
Right? It is not about AI computing or
Yeah.
quantum computing in that
Yeah.
level of
Yeah.
input. It's more of applied tech in
Yeah.
that regard that, oh yes, somebody knows coding and somebody knows how to communicate with hardware. They will be able to build that code. It's not rocket science.
Yeah.
Where a lot of innovation is required on the embedded side.
Mhm.
Right? How do you ensure more precise monitoring and data collection and management? So BMS is not just about collecting data.
Yeah.
It is also about managing the battery and how different cells behave with each other. Right. So all of that is a complex piece. But the point is the overall value that is sitting over there in the BMS stack, right, is very small, but extremely critical.
Yeah.
So whenever in the automotive space, right, traditionally and in a very long tail, right, if you look at it, that anything which is too small a value piece, but too critical to the performance and safety and viability of a product, it is always done in-house.
Yeah.
Because everything is controlled by that,
Yeah.
right? All
Yeah.
visibility, all access control, all leverage on the customer is happening through that
Yeah.
layer.
Yeah.
Price of that piece is very minuscule as compared in
The
comparison to
criticality.
the entire thing. That's what motivates everybody to integrate it in-house. The technology barrier is not too high.
Yeah.
So it makes sense to kind of do it in-house eventually. So
Yeah.
if you look at all companies which started predominantly as a BMS company, they have not scaled
Yes,
beyond a certain
I was
point.
going to get to that point. Yes. Do you see an opportunity there at
It's
all?
not.
But evidently not. Yeah.
And there's data to back it, right? There
Yeah.
were tens or probably close to 100 companies which have started in the BMS space. And after a while, there's no growth.
Yeah.
Either they have gone into a fire sale or some kind of an acquisition
Yeah.
eventually because it was not growing. The
Yeah.
margin profiles were not growing and everybody's trying to squeeze.
Yeah. Just moving into the overall ecosystem as you see it for the next 5-10 years, a very forward-looking question in terms of what are you excited about from like a mid to long-term view? What are the big moving parts for you, and where do you see the biggest opportunities for somebody listening to this podcast looking to build in this space? What would you say are the large white spaces and opportunities?
So the biggest opportunity that we have in the whole EV battery space is that if you look at the entire global south as a market, right? Indian OEMs in the auto space have been far more successful than any other global OEMs. Like they would have a huge presence in US, in Europe, in China, and these markets. But Indian OEMs are the ones which have been far more successful in Africa, in Latin America, in Southeast Asia. And there's a particular reason for it because we share a very common operating condition, types of vehicles that fly on our roads, and the user behavior as well. So if you are starting from a very fundamental approach of building technologies here and solutions over here, the market is not limited to India and you don't have global competition. You will be only competing with people who exist in this ecosystem and are building for this ecosystem. And then at the end of the day, it gives you access to 2/3 of the world population because that's what stays in the global south. So that's the opportunity I'm really excited about.
Great. You've raised a large round earlier this year, so congratulations on that. Just want to quickly segue this conversation into fundraising aspect of being a startup, especially when you're trailblazing and you're almost creating the space. You've been part of an incubator accelerator. You've raised from a homegrown VC, from a global VC, from debt and equity, all shapes and forms, even a corporate strategic. Just generally take us through the whole fundraising aspect of it. How hard or difficult has it been convincing folks to buy into this space? And again, for somebody new, what are the options available today versus like 8-10 years ago when you first started?
So as I was saying, I think the way our journey has been has predominantly without any sort of say covering anything up, like it was shooting in the dark for us, right? We didn't know which investors would take a bite on it and who's the right investor to get in or not get in because it was not a choice. It was available, right? It was not like 10 people are looking in the ecosystem to actually or have a EV thesis or a battery thesis in that regard. So it was far more difficult at every stage of our journey to raise capital because there are a lot of unknowns, right? People, as we go from one stage to another, there are 4 more companies that get funded at the previous stage.
Yeah.
Right? So that's what we have seen.
Yeah.
But that's good for the larger ecosystem because now if somebody starting in the battery EV space or in the climate space in general, right? There are specialized funds which have come up. For example, If you're looking at a seed to a kind of a Series A level, Avana has come up, which is kind of looking purely at climate tech. Omnivore is quite interested. You guys are also looking at climate tech space in that sense, right? So there are multiple funds who have either been formed newly or older funds now at least have a thesis on it. Till the Series A stage, like a $10 million check, a lot of capital is available. Still there's a bit of a gap in the
Growth
Series
stage.
B and beyond stage. But later again, there's a lot of capital. So if you go to a $100 million plus revenue mark with a decent profitable, so to say, P&L statement, right? So there, again, there is volume of capital.
I also want to check with, what has your expectation been from investors, given that the space itself is so complex, it's new even to the investor side, and we know color of money is not all the same. So what have you sought in terms of value add typically, or just even expectation of value add from investors in this space?
So I think the expectation that we have had, very simple, is that as long as we are able to communicate to what we are doing and why there is a strategy that is being formed, right? Continue your trust on us, because when you invested in us. Not in any particular product or any other technology, because you didn't even understand that too much. Right. So that is what very frankly, very simply, that has been the expectation, because we know that I cannot really ask you to come and work with me in the lab and figure out a new way of doing a cell or a battery or whatever it is.
Or connect you to somebody in the portfolio doing the same thing,
Correct.
or
So
solve the same
absolutely.
problem.
So that is not the case. But then at the same time, but also there are like interventions in terms of getting access to NBFCs or getting access to a new set of investors in the next stage. And those expectations are very generic expectations in that regard, but very sector specific is not something which I should be doing, because obviously there is no understanding and knowledge of it, right? We are also figuring out, they're also figuring it out. So that has been the case.
I want to quickly touch upon the OEMs. They're a large part of being like mass adoption and scale enablement. Typically, what has been their approach? You spoke of their resilience in India. They've already been a very export focused space. Supply chains are all localized. World class supply chains has always been built out from India. What has been your experience, given they're technically the incumbents, you could say, dealing with them? Is it more collaborative, conflicting, competitive? What has been the approach, and how has that changed as well?
It has not changed. See, if you look at OEMs in India, they have not been very tech driven. Right. Indian OEMs have always been the last to come up with a new feature in a vehicle, as compared to other international OEMs bringing it first into the market. Like Maruti got the digital dashboard like 5 years, 10 years later than everybody else. Now, from the perspective of what they have done and what they built their strength on, is basically leveraging a lot of auto comp manufacturers to provide them components at whatever the cheapest of the rates, right? And working with them to make sure that they have the highest margin profile at the end of the day, and can control the ecosystem that way. Now, that is something which is not going to work in the EV space, right? Either you are saying that I do my battery myself, I understand that technology, and build the technology and constantly progress it. That's when you can enjoy to have that same kind of profit margin and profile downstream. If you don't do that, your value add is very, very limited, right? If you look, especially when I talk about the commercial vehicle segment, when you talk about a 3-wheeler or a 2-wheeler for last mile, or a 4-wheeler cargo, or any of these commercial category vehicles, where the real sense of EV happens, right? Both from a TCO perspective and both from a climate perspective. And the commercial EV is what makes sense. Over there, the differentiation of the value add by a OEM is very, very small, if they don't do their batteries and all of that enough. So from that perspective, eventually the OEMs would like to integrate that. If they have any way have to integrate that, then what that means is eventually I'm going out of this. So my strategies have to align from a perspective that how do I control leverage on the ecosystem. And that only happens when I work with the end customer. And that's the reason the whole ecosystem play becomes even more important for us.
No, makes sense. And you have partnerships with Bosch, and Amara Raja is also a partner with you. Take us to some of those collaborations, and how are you building together and jointly with them?
So different stakeholders come with a very different expectation working with you, right? So Amara Raja is a very different party to this entire game. Petronas, we also have Petronas, right? They are very different. They're very different. Bosch is very different. So Amara Raja's interest with Log9 has predominantly been on fundamental cell technology, right? How do we advance cell chemistry, localize cell chemistry, and all of that? So that has been Amara Raja's interest. Petronas has always been around that how can we fit into their decarbonization strategy, right? So given they are a fuel major, right? How can they control the energy play. And given EVs are far ahead in terms of traction in India as compared to Malaysia for that matter, right? How can they have more and more deployment in the EV side? So that has been their interest. Bosch came in from a data-driven perspective that they have developed a part of the algorithm for monitoring battery health. Right? And we had the most in-depth and the largest set of data coming in from our batteries. So how could we tie it together to ascertain the residual value, asset value, and how can we kind of use that to enable many more features in the downstream market? So all the stakeholders come up with a very different kind of expectation. And I think communicating in that language of their expectation becomes very, very important.
Yeah, fantastic. Just slightly changing topics. You also have a plant to run, and I think you have more than 800 employees now, if that's correct. Just
over 600 actually.
More than 600. And you have another new problem for you to solve, unlike most other startups, is just the way in which you build the org is significantly different. You have a plant to run, you need a R&D unit. But keen to take a sneak peek and tell us how you're building the org. Where do these 800 people mostly sit? And second half of that question is for anyone aspiring to work in this industry, what are the opportunities available and the skill sets and competencies that you look for? Yeah.
Right. So we have 600 odd people.
Yeah.
And out of that, half of those are on full-time roles with us. So, and we are the largest battery R&D team in the country. So 130 engineers and scientists work in our R&D team for constantly improving and innovating on the products. So it's a very technology-driven house still. Even with that larger base of people in that sense, our attrition rates have been lower than 2% on a quarter.
Wow.
So, and it's primarily because if you look at technology intensity, a very large part of their thought process is that what is the value of work that they're doing. And when they are able to constantly on day-to-day basis see that what they have developed is something which is being deployed and taken to market quickly, that motivates them more than anything else. Right? And that an alignment in technology, basically technology creators, with the purpose of the business is very, very important. You cannot build a innovation house with a 30% attrition rate on a quarter-to-quarter basis, right? So an applied coding or software can still be done, I presume.
Yeah.
I've not seen that space, but that can still be probably done. But when you're developing cell chemistry, when you're doing battery packs, I don't think
these are not processes that can be handed over to someone at 30 days notice.
Because you have started an experiment trail, and each experiment can run for 6 months. You cannot really pass the data to somebody else. We have been, knock on wood, able to create that kind of a, so to say, organization where people are aligned with what we are trying to achieve. And that, I think, is the core strength of Log9 from that perspective.
So clearly you've done something right about culture building. Any playbooks or secret sauces that you want to share? And I'm sure this has changed from the early days to today. But what's the culture like at Log9 and why is this important to you? Yeah.
I think one of the core aspects of culture at Log9 is that staying core to the purpose is very, very important. Any decision which is taken in Log9 is driven from two perspectives. One, it has to be a technological solution, not operational solution.
Yeah.
And secondly, it should be true to the whole aspect of getting a climate solution. Right? And if you stay true to the purpose of it, right? And everything is not opportunistic and a money-making opportunity in that regard. I think people have far more alignment with that kind of organization because money can only be an excitement factor for a very small amount of time.
No, that's incredible. I think on that note, just final question on 2024. What are you most excited about and what are you looking forward to and what can we all expect from the house of Log9?
So in 2024, I think a couple of things. One is that we already are due for a launch for a four-wheeler solution. So we already have one four-wheeler solution, but it's more of an interim solution in that sense. But around a four-wheeler cargo vehicle with our batteries is going to come out in the market very soon. So very excited about that. Secondly, there's a whole market which is opening up on the stationary energy storage side. So a lot of clean energy, connected energy storage systems, and out of that BESS is coming around. Very excited about that opportunity. So I think these two are there. At the same time, we have a 50 megawatt hour cell manufacturing capacity.
Yeah.
So we have to take it to a 2 gigawatt hour kind of a setup. So announcements on that side where the facility is coming up. So I think that's what.
Would you be able to share some of that with us?
I can't right now, but maybe if you connect again in April, that would be the right time.
Oh, fantastic. No, on that note, I want to thank you so much for taking the time out. With your permission, if you don't mind, can we put the URL to both your incubator as well as somebody in Log9 for anyone who would be interested, any founder who wants to reach out and pitch or anyone who's interested in being part of the Log9 journey. Thank you so much once again for making it, sharing your journey, inciting and exciting anecdotes. We learned a lot for sure and more power and praise to you and wish you the very best, Akshay.
Well, thank you, Anjali. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to That One Idea, a podcast series produced by WaterBridge Ventures and recorded at our studio office in Bangalore. WaterBridge Ventures is a leading early stage VC fund in India, partnering with mission oriented founders building game changing businesses. The fund invests up to $3 million across seed to Series A rounds. With over 35 investments in 6 years, WaterBridge has backed leading companies like Magic Pin, An Academy, Elo, Chalo, and City Mall, amongst many others. With over $250 million in assets under management, WaterBridge also runs India's leading seed investment program called Fast Forward. The Fast Forward program invests up to $1 million in seed stage companies with a 7-day turnaround time to all founder pitches. Head over to waterbridge.vc to learn more.